Raoul Dufy was born 1877 in Le Havre, France, into a large family. He left school at the age of 14 to become a clerk in a coffee importing firm, but managed to attend evening classes at the Municipal School of Fine Arts. After a year's service in the Army, his native city awarded him a grant to study art in Paris at the School of Fine Arts in 1900. In 1909, on a trip to Germany, Dufy learned about woodcuts, which are prints made by cutting images into blocks of wood that are then inked and pressed onto paper. A little later, Guillaume Apollinaire invited Dufy to do woodcut illustrations for his book, The Bestiary. In the pages of Apollinaire's book, the woodcut becomes a symbol, melding avant-garde, classical references, and national pride. The Mouse is a woodcut Dufy created for the poet Apollinaire. The poem expresses the lament of the past of a perhaps misspent youth. Dufy's illustration shows the abundance of a seasonal harvest: a pumpkin, a sheath of wheat, grapes, pears, and strawberries, among which the mouse is almost hidden. The composition has a sense of rotation, which is reinforced by the two exuberant birds in the upper corners. The harvest has been reaped and winter is on the way, yet we are reminded of the promise of new life to come through the blossoms and fruits in front of us. The regeneration of life is portrayed with an uplifting sense in Dufy's woodcut through the vibrancy of his lines. Dufy's illustration is a celebration of the passing of time that picks up on and playfully engages the melodramatic tone of Apollinaire's prose. His work with Apollinaire caught the attention of fashion designer Paul Piret. Dufy then became involved with printing woodcuts onto fabric for him. Dufy supplied the designs, engraved the wood blocks, and suggested the color schemes, while Piret made dresses from the resultant fabrics. His own style led him to very decorative designs that were used for textiles, and he became a successful fabric designer until the age of 43. In Dufy's return to Paris in 1910, The Dance was one of 4 large woodcuts he completed and had published under the title The Pleasures of Peace. The dance is made of woodblock printed cretonne that shows a scene of a couple dancing in a heavily vegetated forest with a musician and ship in the background, suggesting they were in foreign land. The dance clearly utilized knife hatchings on wood to create light and volume. Dufy used balanced areas of color to create a contrasting use of space. His originality came from creating an effect of scattered light by the overall cutting of white line hatchings out of the block with a range of gouges and a penknife. Dufy's hatchings are arranged along the edges of the object, so the object receives the light in its center to give his woodcuts balance and style. Dufy's tendency to demarcate different areas through patterning foreshadowed his strong inclination towards applied arts. The aesthetic of this wood engraving recalls both the archaic simplicity of 15th century carvings and popular prints of later centuries, which were heir to medieval predecessors. Once again, Dufy uses negative space to create emphasis in shapes and objects. The figures in Dufy's woodcuts are placed within settings of abundant growth, the playful rhythm of curves and hatchings providing a balanced distribution of black and white. Areas of color are skillfully balanced against a plain background to achieve dynamic repeats in a rough-hewn manner. The decorative appeal of Dufy's woodcuts and their wide dissemination as designs printed on fabric prepared the way for the Art Deco style that was to dominate French fashionable taste during the 1920s. Specifically, the woodcut challenged Dufy to establish space and volume on a surface that remained true to its two-dimensional flat ground. By establishing this aspect of Dufy's art, cross-fertilization that occurred between the fine and decorative arts in the early 20th century is established. Dufy's career as a decorative artist helped shape the way he approached painting. Dufy came of age during the reign of Post-Impressionism, and his first efforts revealed the influence of Bonnard, Gauguin, and Van Gogh. A revelation came to him when he visited the Autumn Fair of 1905. But the true revelation began when Dufy encountered Fauvism, specifically Matisse's luxury, calm, and voluptuous. Werner states that through the years of 1897 and 1920, that he went through an impressionist period, became one of the lesser Fauve, and for several years subjected himself to the structural harshness of Cézanne's practice and to the theories of the Cubists. Dufy adapted the creative use of color in drawing exemplified by Henri Matisse and the Fauve movement, but added a heightened amount of color and light, which became a pivotal element in his work. The places Dufy saw served as springboards for his vivid imagination. He felt free to distort or endow with dreamt-up colors any object he fell in love with. One of his famous remarks is, "Nature, my dear sir, is only a hypothesis." Dufy's fauve style is epitomized in his 1907 work, Fisherman with Red Umbrella near St. Adresse. One of many of his scenes of pleasure, Dufy brightens the aesthetic of fishing. He depicts the water of St. Adresse as a deep blue, which he uses the brushstrokes to draw attention to the fishermen as well as creating motion across the city line. He reduced the composition to simple lines interspersed with broad areas of saturated hues. The amount of detail into shape and form decimates as the scene grows further and shapes become more ambiguous. The deep red color of the umbrella belonging to the woman in the scene forms a contrast to the blue of the sea in the background, reflecting Dufy's interest in the way colors interact differently with natural light. The composition is largely dependent on the arrangement of flat shapes on a flat surface. Boats at Martigues is another oil on canvas. He was constantly drawn to the water and was fascinated by the industrialization and manual labor which took place in commercial hubs along the coast. During Dufy's time in the south of France, he was particularly struck by the charming coastal town of Martigues, the subject of the present work, towns with rich art and historical significance. Dufy's mastery of Fauvist chromaticism and brushwork, alongside his embrace of spatial lessons from Cubism, is shown in the scene. Blue was a central color in Dufy's art because he believed it was the only color which maintains its own character. In all its tones, it will always stay blue. He offsets his use of bold blues in the water and distant boats with drastic colors of reds and oranges to enhance his vision of boats passing through Martigues. His simplified forms, large brushstrokes, and use of bright and bold colors is greatly depicted in this scene. He is focused on introducing more density, space, and geometry, using vertical planes which lead to an unusually high horizon with only a small amount of sky. Though the boats are simple shapes that are generally the same, Dufy used contrasting colors of bold and bright pigments to create more depth. Many of the brushstrokes are visible and harsh in their direction. Dufy creates constant movement throughout his work by doing so, leading the reader around the scene by way of lines. To express wave movement, he covers the water surface with varyingly large, sharp-pointed triangles. He depicts the fragmentation of light and the sun reflections on the water using colors laid on one next to the other, building them up into kinds of pyramids. Both works by Dufy are identifiable by their broad brushstrokes, bold outlines, and vibrant and expressive colors. Using stenographic outlines to define the figures and objects in his compositions, he applied delicate washes of oil paint that resemble watercolor to his canvases, enhancing their sense of joy of living. These are both paintings of places in France that Dufy envisioned to enlighten the feeling of joy in simple nature. Fauvism gave Dufy the outlet to take nature and manipulate it into beautiful paintings of bright, vivacious scenes Dufy envisioned that the natural scenes could not represent. His distinctive style is characterized by bright colors thinly spread over a white ground, with objects sketchily delineated by sensuously undulating lines. Dufy displayed an unrivaled decorative sense, juggling with consummate skill broad areas of bold, saturated colors of blue, red, green, and yellow, a calligraphic line of great verve and fluidity, and an assured, if carefree, appreciation for the compositional liberties of modern painting. Raoul Dufy is remembered for his vibrant and vivacious paintings that depict the simple pleasures of life in ways that other artists were unable to capture using his bold and sharp strokes of brilliant colors. What distinguished him from many artistic colleagues was an inborn serenity that kept him from squandering his energies like Gauguin, and a happy temperament that saved him from the despair of Van Gogh. As one of his biographers put it, "What Van Gogh has done in sorrow, Dufy has done in joy." The artist developed a signature technique of highly stylized calligraphic drawings accented with washes of bold color. In his transitions from post-impressionism to Fauvism and continuing to Cubism, each piece of his work was unique to his personal style, which is now labeled Dufyesque. Dufy extended the range of his work with innovative fabric design, book illustration, ceramics, and tapestry. An unparalleled colorist, Dufy's highly decorative works retain a level of freshness and verve that have made them popular with modern audiences. The emotion of joy and pleasure depicted through his use of bold colors and broad brushstrokes in his works differentiates from any other modern artist of his time.